What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. We've got a great episode lined up for you today because we have some combine numbers to react to, which players are looking now more than ever like Patriots fits after what they did in Indianapolis. We're also going to kick off our prototypical Patriots series. That thing is over on NBCSportsBoston.com. We are starting with quarterbacks, believe it or not. We are. And there is one name in particular who stands out to me as a Patriots fit. And no, you wouldn't have to draft him on day one, but we're going to start with a discussion, and we're going to be pulling from some of our friends of the podcast that we spoke to out in Phoenix this year about a very pertinent topic for this year's offseason for the New England Patriots. That is the everlasting question of offensive tackle versus wide receiver. Where do you start? What do you prioritize? And if you're the Patriots specifically, what will they prioritize? We're talking to Mike Lombardi, who we know has worked here in New England, who we know has Bill Belichick's ear or has for a long, long time and understands how Bill Belichick thinks. We're also talking to Geoff Schwartz of Fox Sports and SiriusXM NFL Radio, former NFL offensive lineman. He may have an opinion that surprises you. And then we're talking to our great buddy, Riddick of ESPN, who has thoughts on this as well. Extensive background in pro personnel departments in the NFL for years. So fascinating to get his opinion as well. Well, let's start with Mike Lombardi, who I think is a great person to begin this conversation with, especially because of our focus on the New England Patriots, because of his background with the team, because of his experience working for Bill Belichick. And when you look at it, I think it's important for us to define what we mean when we say prioritize. Does that mean the most money? Does that mean what you get taken care of first? In my opinion, that's where do you spend the largest piece or the largest piece of the pie when you're looking at your overall off-season resources, whether that's draft capital, actual capital, trade chips. That to me is priority. It's not what comes first on the timeline. It's not what should be lined up first sequentially. It's what are you spending the most to acquire, to improve your team? Receivers, tackles, the Patriots need both. What does Mike Lombardi say is most important?
You mentioned the offensive line and how that needs to be better this coming year for the Patriots. I'm curious, though, as they go and build their team for 2023 and beyond, should it be offensive line that's the priority? Or I'm looking at the Eagles this year, and what a drastic difference A.J. Brown made. And it was a huge investment, but could you see Bill making that kind of move to elevate the offense to where it needs to be to really contend?
I come from the school of, this is from Bill Walsh, the last position you fix on your team is the wide receiver. That's Walsh believe, and he was an offensive coach. If you don't fix that line, they're not counting the 5 Mississippi. So it's going to be hard for you to throw the football. And I think with the receivers they have, whether it's Thornton develops a step in the second year, whether it's Parker comes back and plays and stays healthy, or Kendrick Bourne or whomever, or the tight ends, they've got skill players. They just didn't protect well enough to get the ball to them.
So Mike Lombardi citing Bill Walsh there. I think it's probably safe to assume that Bill Belichick has a similar kind of approach, even if you think it's a little old school. And even if you see the game and the way it's changed and the emphasis on the importance of having next level receivers to be able to change your offense and change how opposing defenses handle you. I wouldn't be shocked if Bill Belichick viewed it the same way as Mike Lombardi. But does that mean he needs to go out and spend the vast majority, or again, the largest piece of his resource pie on the offensive line, on that specifically that offensive tackle position, and then say we're good elsewhere? No. And I do think there is room for both schools of thought, whether you're Bill Walsh or Mike Lombardi, and you say you've got to get the offensive line figured out first, or you're somebody like Geoff Schwartz, who played in the NFL on the offensive line, as did his brother Mitchell, for the Kansas City Chiefs, won a Super Bowl with Kansas City. Yet he has this view of, yes, the offensive line is important, of course, but does it need to be the priority? Do you need to have a stud at that right tackle position, or is it enough to have just enough? Let's hear from Geoff Schwartz right now.
I think the thing you try to do with your offensive line is you try to have, instead of having like one elite guy and maybe like four, you try to have like five. If you get 5 average guys, right? Like just kind of like 5 average guys, you can survive, right? So like to me, can you get if you can draft the elite wide receiver, let's say, and might not be the year for that actually, and then find like the average right tackle in the free agency, that feels like the better plan maybe. Or you get the elite wide receiver in free agency, you find that right tackle in the draft. Like that to me feels like where you would look. Like you need to have that elite wide receiver. You have to either get that in the draft or in free agency. You can fill that right tackle spot with like average. Like you average right tackle, you will survive in New England, right? So that's kind of where I would look to build this. But Belichick's history with wide receivers isn't great. So I don't know if people trust him to figure that out.
Is it hard to even find the average tackle though? Like those guys, it feels like are rare.
I'll give you an example. So the Chiefs are playing this weekend with Andrew Wiley at right tackle. Andrew Wiley would be the best offensive tackle on many teams in the NFL. He is the worst on the Chiefs. Worst, okay? Again, the worst is better than most. Like he would be perfect in that spot. Like you put him in there, never have to worry about him. Like that type of player is like what I'm talking about. Where you just like you find your right tackle, like just put him in there, and then kind of spend other resources and find that elite wide receiver.
Where do you fall in Mike McGlinchey? He has just been trying to poke around a little bit, who the Patriots might like, who they might be interested in. You've watched a lot of Orlando Brown, who's supposed to be a free agent this year as well.
I'm kind of picky on who I would give. I guess it depends on the tier of what you're paying someone. Also depends on the offense you're running. Like if you're going to run more of like a power run scheme, McGlinchey's probably not for you. Or that's more of Orlando Brown for you. But Brown doesn't want to play right tackle, so you have to move Trent back there, I guess, or. Brown's going to get a lot of money too. I just don't know if you want to allocate all that money to Brown.
I love that conversation with Geoff Schwartz because, again, given his background, you would think he would be coming to us and saying, of course, games played in the trenches, that's where it all starts. And if you don't have things figured out there, if you don't have the talent that you need there, then you can't get to where every team wants to be by season's end. Nope, not the case. You just have to be good enough. The Andrew Wiley example, I think, is a pretty good one. Nowhere near the best player on the Chiefs offensive line, but certainly good enough. And I think for the Patriots, this is particularly relevant because when you're looking at that tackle spot, and he mentioned the name at the end of our chat there, Orlando Brown, that's going to be the most expensive tackle, probably the most talented, quote unquote, talented tackle on the free agent market this offseason. Do the Patriots need that guy? I don't think so, especially at the price that he's going to command. And what I've been told is that the Patriots probably, because of the price tag, are probably not going to be as interested as some other teams might be. I think they are okay with going with the okay player, as in somebody like Mike McGlinchey, who's not as good a pass protector probably as he is a run blocker, but maybe the Patriots look at that and say, as long as he's sufficient, as long as we can keep Mac Jones upright often enough, if he can run the ball, or if we can run the ball behind him, there's value in that. And then we could play off that. If in the passing game he's having an issue with somebody who's coming off that right edge, maybe we can chip with a tight end. We can chip with Ramondre Stevenson. Mac Jones wants to get the ball out of his hands quickly anyway. Bill O'Brien likes to use the hurry up. Maybe that's something we can use to offset opposing pass rushers. Now, if you're having to do that while also paying an offensive tackle $15, $16, $17 million a year, that's not what you want. But if Mike McGlinchey falls in the range of, 13, 14, now you might be okay with doing whatever you have to do to make that work because all you wanted to do was sort of get back to average along the offensive line. Now you're freed up to use some of your other resources elsewhere. And that's what the Patriots should do, in my opinion. If you're asking me, right, we're asking Mike Lombardi, what does he think? What does Bill Belichick maybe think based on what Mike tells us? What is the new school of thought that I thought we heard there from Geoff? If you're asking me, that's what you do. I lean more towards Geoff there, is go the okay route at offensive tackle. Spend a little bit at offensive tackle. Make sure you're secure there, but don't go over the top at that position. Don't go Orlando Brown. Go Mike McGlinchey. Then you still have resources to re-sign Jacoby Myers. And now you could play a game offensively tomorrow once you make those two moves. And now you are freed up. If Quentin Johnson from TCU falls to you at number 14 overall and you want that field stretcher, that true boundary threat, somebody that you think could be a DK Metcalf type who's just going to run by you and out jump you and out muscle you to footballs at the next level, then go ahead and do it. you're freed up to do that. If you want Jackson Smith and Jigba because you think you could use them all over certain formations and you could play him in the slot, maybe it bumps Jacoby Myers outside occasionally. You don't love that because the speed isn't necessarily what it is in other places around the league, but he's versatile. He has been used as a boundary down the field threat occasionally. Maybe you go that route. You're freed up to be able to use that first overall pick and that second round pick. You're not boxed into a corner on draft weekend saying, well, we got to get a tackle. We got to get one, and we got to try to get one of the best ones. In the draft, to me, it's a little scarier because even just to get a sufficient tackle, I think those guys go pretty early. It's very rare that you find a Marcus Cannon in the 5th round who ends up being a starter for a Super Bowl team. It's very rare that you find even a Sebastian Vollmer, a 2nd round pick who becomes a very good starter for a championship team. Matt Light, same deal. And now those are 3 Patriots examples right off the bat. You're probably listening and saying, Phil, it sounds like you could get those guys on day 2, maybe even day 3. But the odds are that no, that's not the case, especially if you want a guy who can play tomorrow and play starting caliber football for a contending team tomorrow, which is what the Patriots need. So that's the route I would go. Mike McGlinchey, Jacoby Myers, unless you can try to trade for a free agent receiver that you really think is going to be an upgrade, and then use that 1st round pick on a wideout. I think that makes a lot of sense. There's one other opinion, though, I want to get to on this receiver versus offensive line debate, and it's that of Louis Riddick, because he takes a little bit different track. It's not necessarily offensive tackle versus receiver. For him, he includes a 3rd position that we should be talking about here. Let's get to Louis right now.
You can see why, especially if you had foresight into the fact that Mac was going to be so good from the pocket, which you probably should have anyway, judging from his time in Alabama. You would maybe even go so far as to say, you know what, really build that pocket and build that offensive line inside out, which is why, look, people would sit there and obviously say, well, look, we're not going to argue over Cole Strange, but maybe where you picked him, we'll argue. But remember back in the days of Drew Brees in New Orleans, Sean Payton had that thing built inside out as far as he had all the money really invested in center and 2 guards. I mean, at that time it was Carl Nicks and Jari Evans, who were the 2 best guards in the NFL, and he had just average guys on the outside at offensive tackle because of the fact that Drew liked to just sit right there in that maybe 8-yard by 5-yard box and deal from there. So, yeah, I mean, obviously what you're talking about when you're talking about trying to draft an offensive tackle who's a stalwart and, in the grand scheme of the overall 53-man roster, that's probably where they'll go. But for sure, because of where where Mac likes to live, that's probably where you're going to want to go.
What kind of ceiling do you think Mac has?
Look, I think Mac can be a top 10 to top 12 type of quarterback because of the fact that he has great processing speed. He has enough arm strength to throw the football both horizontally and vertically how you want. He showed that at Alabama. Look, the football field in college is the same length as it is in the NFL, so he can launch it where it needs to go. Obviously, I think as he gets older, his arm strength will improve to where those tight window throws, and maybe when he is not releasing it with the same kind of anticipation, he'll still be able to get there. So I still think he has a lot of growth yet to still really experience, both in terms of his strength and his football IQ, which is something that's always growing. Look, the guy who preceded him in New England, in Tom Brady, was learning throughout the entire course of his 20-plus year career. So I don't think we've even come close to scratching the surface for what Mac Jones can be. And I understand, now we're not really interested in allowing him to grow and develop. We want results, especially in New England, where, they're used to winning championships. So people are going to become very, very frustrated if he isn't putting up the kind of numbers and making the kind of eye-catching plays that some of the other young quarterbacks are making. But just tame it down a little bit because he still has a lot to go.
So Louis Riddick, obviously a big Mac Jones fan. He has been for years. We've had him on the podcast talking to us about Mac Jones and the potential that he thinks he has. But I love that comparison that he brings up about Drew Brees. That was, again, another extremely high-end comp for Mac Jones, even before the year he was drafted in 2021. But when you look at how they built and all the money they spent on the interior, at the center position, at the guard spots, and you think about the styles of play, even if you don't think Mac Jones, will ever get to Drew Brees' level as a Hall of Fame player, one of the best all time, but that's fair. But could you say that their styles of play are relatively similar? I think you could. As pocket passers that aren't, the 6'4" and up mold, like a Tom Brady, like a Peyton Manning. These are guys that, they're not diminutive, I don't think, by any stretch, but they're also not the biggest guys. And they need to play from inside the pocket, and they have the ability to, when they get that edge pressure, step up, but you need that room to step up. Well, what do you need to create room to step up in the pocket when you're dropping back to pass? You need a solid interior, you need a solid center, 2 solid guards. Maybe that's how the Patriots viewed it last year when they took a guard in the first round. Now, that doesn't appear to be an investment that they need to make or need to be expending significant resources on this offseason, because they have Cole Strange, because they have David Andrews, Mike Onwenu, all sitting there for them on the interior, and that group should get better as they go into their second year together. But it's important, I think, for us to think about moving forward. David Andrews, probably closer to the end than the beginning. Mike Onwenu, going into a contract year. You want to make sure you've got that interior solidified. So yes, right tackle, you've got to get that figured out in some way, shape, or form right now. But you have to keep an eye on the interior as well, and keep an eye on the depth in the interior. Injuries happen. And you'd love to have James Ferentz. He's been a valuable guy to your team at points over the last few years here. But might it be a good idea to get another player that you feel could eventually become starting caliber in this year's draft, in this offseason? A Ted Karras type who could fill in a pinch, maybe play all 3 spots. I love that take from Louis Riddick. We love having him on the podcast as often as we can. All right, let's shift gears now. Let's talk about what happened at the Combine last week in Indianapolis. If you want to read my Combine Buzz piece, you can find it on NBCSportsBoston.com. We're talking about Jacoby Myers' market. Sounds like that thing is going to be between 12 and 15 million per year. We'll see where it ends up. We'll see once the deals and the offers officially start flying where that thing goes. But it feels to me as though that's where the league thinks he will end up at this point in time. We talked about DeAndre Hopkins, what he would need, or what the Cardinals would need, going back their way in a trade for him. Would you be willing to give up a second-round pick to bring DeAndre Hopkins in, who's got a $19 million a year base salary, but you're going year to year essentially with the guy who's over 30, but would represent an upgrade for your offense? We're talking as well about one player in particular that I was told really seemed like a Patriot in meetings, and that was Jonathan Mingo, the receiver out of Ole Miss, ended up testing as one of the best athletes in this year's class. Height, weight, speed. This guy is 6'2", 220 pounds. This guy is rocked up. He's tough. He'll play special teams for you. He will block for you. He will play on the boundary. He had a really good a really good week at the Senior Bowl. And so that's a player who it sounds like might be a day 3 selection right now, or at least that's how the league views him. But the way he tested, the way he interviewed, where he knows his offense front and back. And it's not all that complicated of an offense. That's what the league will tell you. But the fact that he knows it as well as he does, and he knows the adjustments, that says something. That says that he understood everything that was thrown his way as a collegian. And as you project out and try to figure out how much can he handle at the NFL level, you feel pretty good about it, even though he's coming from the offense he's coming from. There are other offenses that are pretty simple too. Tennessee. But not every skill position player coming out of Tennessee understood that offense as well as Mingo understood what he was doing at Ole Miss. So that's a name we should be keeping an eye on. Here are a few more based on some of the tests that we saw in Indianapolis. Let's stick with that receiver position because we have to talk about Jackson Smith-Njigba. I know we talked about him before on this podcast. Seems like a great Patriots fit, but arguably the best on-field workout, just how naturally he catches the ball. They called him actually the natural at Ohio State when he was part of a group, that included Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. So the guy's hands are just so soft. He's so fluid in terms of how he moves around the football field. Pads, no pads. I understand the combine is what it is, but when you stand out the way Jackson Smith-Njigba did, that says something. And then you put together some of the numbers that he put together, 3.93 short shuttle. And then you're talking about a 3-cone drill of 6.57. I mean, these are elite numbers. This guy tested essentially similarly to Julian Edelman back in 2009 at Edelman's pro day at Kent State, even though he's 2 or 3 inches taller than Edelman was at 6'1", 196 pounds. So Jackson Smith-Njigba, at number 14 overall, I think you have to consider it. He's certainly, given how he tested and given the value that the Patriots place on those change of direction drills, he showed that he is what they want, generally speaking, at that position. Here's a name we haven't yet mentioned on the podcast. Let's stick with receivers for now, because there were some freaks in this group. And that's, generally speaking, again, what the Patriots draft in the first couple of rounds at receiver, whether you're talking about N'Keal Harry, who, even though His on the field speed said one thing, and his time speed wasn't necessarily special, but he was explosive when you looked at his jumps. And then you factored in the height and the weight, bigger bodied guy, about 230 pounds. That was somebody that really fit the suit of that athletic freak that the Patriots, generally speaking, really like. Now let's talk about a receiver we haven't yet discussed on the podcast. It's Bryce Ford Wheaton from West Virginia. Unbelievable test numbers, a perfect 10 out of 10 when it comes to our guy Kentley Platt's RAS scores, relative athletic score. He's at MathBomb on Twitter. If you're a big fan of the combine, hopefully you're already following him and you are getting real-time updates as to how these guys were performing. But he does a great job of putting everything together: height, weight, speed, jumps, agility times, arm length, even factoring that into his relative athletic score. And it spits out a number from 0 to 10. Bryce Ford Wheaton trying to break the scale here, coming in again at a 10.0. This is without the agility testing, but this is somebody who ran at 6'4", 221 pounds. He ran a 4.3840. And by the way, the agility testing is going to end up helping him out here because he was one of the fastest at the entire combine across positions when it came to the short shuttle, with a 4.15 short shuttle. That is ridiculous at his size. A 41-inch vert and a 10'9" broad jump at his size. Freaky stuff. 33.5-inch arms to boot. This is somebody who's going to play special teams for you. And if you can get him to refine his receiver skills, he is such a pure physical talent. He has to be an intriguing guy for the Patriots, again, who really highly value athleticism at the position. Sticking with that same sort of theme, Andre Yosevich from Princeton, 9.92 RAS score, 6'3", 205 pounds. So a little bit lighter, a little bit thinner, but a 39-inch vertical, 10'8" broad jump. This guy is explosive, a real track background at Princeton. So 4.43 speed. He's going to be fast. He's going to be quick. Another great time in the short shuttle, which the Patriots really value. 4.12 there. So good size, good quickness, good speed. If the Patriots are looking for one of these types who have a bigger frame but have some real freaky athleticism to them, and they're guys that maybe you could get on late day 2 into day 3 of the draft, that might be the kind of dice roll you're willing to make if you're trying to improve that position group. Now, at tight end, there's one name that stands out to me. This guy we knew would be a prototypical Patriot, but I didn't know to this degree coming into the combine. Now, leaving the combine, Darnell Washington out of Georgia. Are you kidding me? 11-inch hands, 34-inch arms, 6'7", 6'6.5", let's round up to 6'7", 264 pounds, ran a 4.65 40 with a 10'2" broad jump and a 4.08 in the short shuttle. That was the third fastest short shuttle time at the combine. Jackson Smith-Njigba, number 1 at 3.93. Julius Brents, who we're going to talk about, at 4.05 was 2. And then you have this behemoth tight end at 6'7", 264 at number 3 overall, 4.08 in the short shuttle. That is absurd. You have a guy like that who can block almost as a tackle in the run game. He's an extra tackle, almost like having a tackle eligible play out in the field with his size. And then you add that kind of athleticism. Is he the most nuanced route runner at this position in this year's class? No, probably not. But with that athleticism and with that size, he certainly falls under the category of these guys don't grow on trees that Bill Belichick is oftentimes mentioning. And to me, I think unfortunately for the Patriots, he's now become a first round type of prospect because he's so rare. So if there's a team late in round 1 that has its other positions of need filled at the premium positions. So if you're not looking for a tackle, if you're not looking for a receiver, if you're not looking for a quarterback, obviously, and a tight end could elevate your offense, man, Darnell Washington, somebody you have to consider at the back end of round 1. If he gets all the way to the Patriots in round 2, I would not be stunned, even though it's not a quote unquote position of need right now for the Patriots with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith on the roster. First of all, you have to be looking to the future at that position, number 1. But number 2, he's so rare. I would not be stunned at all to see Bill Belichick pull the trigger on Darnell Washington. Let's go to another Darnell quickly. Darnell Wright, somebody we've mentioned again on the podcast out of Tennessee. Smallish hands for the position at just 9 inches flat, but plenty of length, 33 and 3/4-inch arms, 6'5", 333 pounds. This man is large. This is a block out the sun kind of right tackle that the Patriots could, in my opinion, plug and play day one. You heard our conversation with Louis Riddick a couple of weeks ago when we posted a different portion of that conversation where he talked about Darnell Wright and just how effective he was against Will Anderson. Maybe the best defensive player in this year's draft, maybe number 2 if he's not number 1. Just wiped him out, just eliminated him from that game. So not only is he big, which we knew, but the man's athletic too. Almost a 5 40. That's elite. Again, according to our buddy Math Bomb, Kent Lee Platt, 947 RAS score. That is special. So he's explosive and he's big. That's a Patriot if I've ever seen one. Peter Skoronski, he qualifies as well. The height, not necessarily there, 6'4", but tall enough, in my opinion. The hand size there at 10 inches. The arm length is probably going to be the problem, but even at 32.25 inches, is Dante Scarnecchia, who told me years ago that bleep is way overrated when I asked him about arm length at the tackle position, is he going to sit here and say, well, he can't play tackle because his arms are too short? Or is he going to look at the tape and see that he's probably the best tackle in this year's class performance-wise and see that he's also certainly athletic enough, which the Patriots value at that position, 34.5-inch vertical, over a 9-foot broad jump? I mean, this guy's still an elite athlete. He's right there. He's sniffing 9 on the 0 to 10 scale for RAS. That's a name we should be keeping an eye on as well if he somehow slips all the way to 14. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, Jack Campbell, who we talked about in our last podcast, I said, I told you at the time that I think this guy's going to impress some people. He's going to open some eyes with his athletic testing. He gets a lot of credit for his instincts and his football IQ, and he's tough, but he's a better athlete than people are giving him credit for. Oh, yeah, he certainly is. 6'5", 250 pounds, 249 exactly at the combine, 37.5-inch vertical. 10'8" broad jump. This man is explosive. Yes, he ran a 4.71, but you're not necessarily looking for that long speed at that position. You're looking for change of direction. You're looking for explosiveness, and he has that in spades. Jack Campbell does. Also a Campbell Trophy finalist. That's the academic Heisman for college football. Smart, tough, athletic. I mean, would you be shocked? Bill Belichick shocked us before with some of the positions that he's attacked in round 1. Would you be shocked if he figures out a way to trade down and still land Jack Campbell, who he would love to be playing in the middle of his defense for years to come? That wouldn't surprise me either. Now, Julius Brents, we mentioned him earlier out of Kansas State, big corner at 6'3", 198 pounds. This is something the Patriots need at that position. He went 4.05 in the short shuttle. Not incredible when it came to the long speed, 4.53 in the 40, but man, again, explosive, 41.5-inch vertical. Over an 11-foot broad jump, 11 feet 6 inches in the broad jump. That is special explosiveness at that position and at that length. That's a rare athlete to be playing cornerback, and it's certainly a rare athlete in the Patriots cornerback room right now. Could you get him in round 3? If you could figure that out, I think that would make the Patriots a better defense immediately in 2023. Couple of corners that we've mentioned before here too, both out of South Carolina. Darius Rush, who I loved at the Senior Bowl. Turns out he's a great athlete too. Another big guy, 6'2", 198 pounds, ran a 4.37. So he's got the size and the speed. Man, I think he might be a round 2 player now. I was hoping he would be sort of a day 2, late day 2 guy, maybe early day 3 guy. I think he's too athletic. And then his teammate, Cam Smith, also a great athlete. We're actually going to talk to Cam Smith on the podcast a little bit later this offseason before the draft. 4.45 at 6'1", 180 pounds. Again, very slight, but special athleticism. Another 11-foot broad jump tester, Cam Smith was. So what an athletic corner tandem that they had down there in South Carolina. SEC competition. Bill Belichick is going to love that. Then there's a couple of Illinois defensive backs that we need to talk about. Sidney Brown and Jartavius Martin. So Sidney Brown's sort of the name from that group. And we're mentioning both these guys, number one, because Brett Bielema is their head coach. We know Bill Belichick loves himself some Brett Bielema, former Patriots assistant, Brett Bielema. But you look at how athletic these guys are. And if the Patriots are looking for safety help, if Devin McCourty retires, a decision that could come as early as this week, then you should be looking at these types of players. Sidney Brown, 5'10", 211, loves to tackle, loves to throw his body around, 40-inch vertical, 4.49 in the 40. His teammate, Jartavius Martin, big tackler, Pro Football Focus, loves his tackling ability. Again, very explosive at a position where explosiveness matters. 44-inch vertical, 11-foot broad. So a couple of Brett Bielema players for you to keep an eye on as we continue and we approach draft weekend here coming up. Man, it's feeling like it's only weeks away now, guys. Okay, last thing I wanted to mention, prototypical Patriots. You can look at our prototypical quarterbacks for this offseason. The name to me that stands out is the prototype at that position for the Patriots this year. It's Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker. Yes, he's 25. Yes, he's older than Mac Jones. Yes, he's older than Mac Jones. Yes, he's coming off a knee injury. But as somebody who would be available on day 2, and I think would not have been, he probably would have been a day 1 pick had he not torn up his knee late last season. I love the athleticism that he brings to the position. I love that he can play from the pocket. Yes, it was a little bit of a simplistic offense there in Tennessee, but in terms of all the boxes that the Patriots usually check at that position, what they like to draft there, Hendon Hooker has it. We've got some other names that would be available later in the draft for you to check out on NBCSportsBoston.com as well. But Hendon Hooker right at the top of the list of prototypical Patriots quarterbacks in this year's draft. Let me know what you think about all of these players we had a chance to talk about today. Hendon Hooker in particular, let us know in the comments on YouTube if you're watching us there. We appreciate you. We appreciate you listening. Please rate, comment, and subscribe, and we'll talk to you very, very soon.